Where in the world are you watching this from and what time is it? Subscribe now because this story won't just entertain you. It might haunt you. I remember the courtroom like it was yesterday, though I try not to. The air was thick, a weight hanging over me. I could barely breathe, but I had to. I had to stay calm. The judge sat there waiting for me to speak, as if the answer could change everything. My mother had just accused me of being an unfit mother, and I could feel her eyes burning through me from the back of the room. There was no surprise in her face, just cold certainty, as if she had been planning this for years. The walls closed in. My hands shook, but I managed to place the USB on the table. The silence that followed felt like eternity. I watched them press play. The courtroom fell into an unnatural stillness, a deep, suffocating silence that seemed to stretch on forever. It wasn't just the footage. It was everything, the years of her judgment, the years of my own silence. The judge's eyes flickered, his posture stiffened. The whole room knew something had shifted, something they couldn't quite explain. But it was too late for that. Too late to take back what I had just shown them. I don't know how long it lasted. Those few seconds, minutes, hours, time seemed to slip away as I sat there waiting. My breath caught in my throat, my chest tightening with every passing moment. It was like I could hear my heart beating louder than everything else. My past was on display for them. I wasn't just fighting for custody of my child anymore. I was fighting for my very soul, for a chance to be seen as more than the girl my mother had always wanted to break. They had no idea what I had been through, what she had put me through. The guilt she made me carry, the lies I had to swallow. I wasn't an unfit mother. No, I was simply a woman who had never been allowed to be anything more than what my mother wanted me to be. A child who had been molded in a shape I never fit. She had always known how to make me feel small, how to make me doubt myself. And I had never questioned it, not until now. The silence in the courtroom pressed down on me like 1,000 tons of stone. It was her victory, wasn't it? But it was also mine. I remember the way my hands trembled as I sat there, the pressure of everything building inside me. I couldn't think straight, couldn't form a sentence that would make sense of all this pain. I had never felt more alone, yet never so surrounded by people. Their whispers, their judgments, their stares, all of it just piled onto me. My mother, the woman who had shaped me, broken me, and somehow kept me alive, had won again. My mind went back to childhood, to the little girl I once was, tucked away in her room, her only solace the soft, quiet moments before sleep took over. Those were the times when I allowed myself to forget that my mother's love was conditional, based on how well I obeyed her rules, followed her instructions. I had learned that early on. To be anything other than perfect was to be unloved. To be anything other than what she demanded was to be nothing at all. And yet here I was in this courtroom as an adult, still trying to prove that I was worthy. Still trying to make my mother proud. Even now, after everything. Even after the years of her dismissive glances and the cold silence she offered instead of affection. But it wasn't just her. It was everyone. It was my whole life, this endless pressure to meet expectations that weren't mine. I couldn't even say what I truly wanted anymore. I couldn't even say I loved my child the way I should, because my mother would twist it into something I wasn't. She always did. It was like I was trapped in this cycle, a loop of guilt, shame, and anger I couldn't escape. And yet there was that moment, the one I couldn't shake, the one that burned into me as I watched the judge and the jury, all of them staring at that screen, unsure of what to make of it. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel relief. I just felt empty. Because even though I had won this tiny battle, the war was far from over. I could still hear the click of her heels as she walked out of the room, the disapproval still hanging in the air like a cloud. She was never going to change. And maybe in some twisted way I didn't want her to. Maybe it was easier to stay angry, easier to stay broken than to let go of the only thing I had ever known. That USB? It wasn't just a file. It was my life. It was everything that had been said to me, everything that had been done to me, and everything I had hidden away. But it wasn't the end of the story. No, this was just the beginning. As I sat there, I felt the weight of the silence, the unease that crept into the room after the footage had ended. I couldn't tell if they were afraid or if they pitied me. And the longer the silence dragged on, the more I realized I didn't care. I wasn't going to let anyone control me anymore. Not her. Not them. Not anyone. But in that moment I felt it, the quiet before the storm. The silence stretched on as the judge readied himself to speak. My heart raced. Was this what I had been waiting for all my life? Or was this just another chapter in a story that would never end? I didn't know. All I knew was that whatever came next, I wasn't going to let it break me. I had already been broken. The only thing left was to rebuild. And this was just the beginning. The silence in the courtroom lasted too long. I don't know how much time passed before the judge finally spoke, his voice pulling me back to the present, but everything felt unreal now, distant, like I was watching it all unfold through a thick veil. The jury was still staring at me, as if they were waiting for something else, something more. I thought I was ready for whatever was coming next, but in that moment I wasn't. The words spilled from the judge's mouth, and I barely heard them, too caught in the chaos of my own thoughts. She's an unfit mother, yes, but she'll be given a chance. His voice seemed to echo in my skull, growing more hollow the longer it lingered. I couldn't believe it. The words cut into me, but the sting was nothing compared to the emptiness. I had won this small fleeting moment, but it didn't change the way the world saw me. It didn't change the deep-rooted ache in my chest that I had lived with for as long as I could remember. I had spent so many years trying to convince myself that I was strong, that I was more than just my past, that I could rise above it. But now, sitting in that cold, sterile courtroom, all of it, my mother's manipulations, her control over me, felt like it had come crashing back. My fingers were still trembling when I gathered my things to leave. I couldn't look at anyone, couldn't meet their eyes, because I knew what they saw in me now. They saw the cracks, the moments when I faltered, the moments when my humanity bled through the mask I had carefully crafted. I walked out of that room like I had just been sentenced. That night I sat alone in my apartment, the empty space around me pressing down like it was closing in. The USB I had used to show my truth sat on the table, its light blinking steadily as if mocking me, daring me to look at it again. I didn't. Not yet. I could hear the muffled sound of my mother's voice echoing in my head, accusing, demeaning, breaking me down. I'd never realized how much I had relied on her opinion, how much I had allowed her to shape every decision I made, every thought I had. I always thought she was right, that I was the one who was wrong, that I was the one who couldn't get it together, that I was the one who failed. But now everything was starting to unravel. The guilt, the fear. It all felt like it was closing in on me, and for the first time I wondered if I'd ever been free. Had I ever been truly free? Or had I just been too afraid to face the truth? I wasn't ready to answer that. I picked up my phone and there it was, her message. "I'll see you in court again. You'll never win." Those words hit me harder than anything I had ever heard from her. I stared at them for longer than I should have, but they didn't break me this time. No. Something inside me had shifted, and though I couldn't yet name it, I knew I wasn't going back to the scared little girl I used to be. I tried to sleep that night, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying the courtroom in my mind, the look on my mother's face, the way she had stood there so certain, so unwavering. And then I remembered the look in my father's eyes. He hadn't said a word the entire time, but I had seen it. The disappointment, the guilt. He was always so careful not to take sides, but I knew. He had failed me too. He had always failed me. He was too weak to stand up to her, too afraid to protect me, to tell me that I wasn't a failure. I had never been the failure. It was always her. Always. The next day, I met with my lawyer, someone I barely trusted but needed to talk to. As soon as I walked into the office, she gave me a look. It wasn't judgment, but it was something worse, pity. And I hated it. I hated the way she looked at me like I was broken. But worse, I hated the way I couldn't deny it. I wasn't whole. Not anymore. Not after everything I had been through. I was just a patchwork of old wounds and forgotten dreams. She told me that we had a good chance of winning the case. But I didn't care. I wasn't fighting to win anymore. I was fighting for something I couldn't name. Maybe for peace. Maybe for redemption. Or maybe just to finally stop being the person everyone expected me to be. When I left the office, the world felt colder and emptier. My mother's words still rang in my ears, but now something else was starting to creep in, doubt. What if it wasn't her fault? What if I had misread everything? What if I had been blind all along? I had lived my life assuming I was the victim. I thought I was the one who had been wronged, but now I was starting to wonder. Was I? Maybe I was the one who had hurt her. Maybe I was the one who had caused all the pain, all the anger, all the dysfunction. Maybe it wasn't just her. Maybe it was me too. I couldn't understand what was happening. I couldn't make sense of any of it. And then just when I thought I might be breaking free from all of it, the phone rang. It was my brother. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since he sided with her during one of our last arguments. But his voice when he spoke sent chills down my spine. "We need to talk," he said. "You won't believe what I found." And just like that, everything I had believed about my family, about my life, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. What had he found? What had I missed? Was there more to this story than I had ever known? I couldn't breathe as I hung up the phone. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. I was falling again, deeper this time, into a place where nothing was what it seemed, where nothing could be trusted. And I had no idea where it would lead, or if I'd survive the descent. But I knew this much: whatever truth he had uncovered, it was about to shatter everything I thought I knew. I wasn't ready, but I was going to find out. The phone call from my brother kept ringing in my mind. "You won't believe what I found." I couldn't shake the weight of those words. There was something off about him, something cold in his voice that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I thought I knew him, or at least I used to. The brother I once trusted, the one who had always been my partner in crime, had somehow morphed into a stranger. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since that fight we had over the family estate, the inheritance, the things that had always seemed so trivial. But now, in the quiet aftermath of that phone call, it felt like nothing was trivial anymore. Not the inheritance, not the betrayals, not the silence between us. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What had he uncovered? What dark truth was sitting in the pit of my stomach, waiting for me to face it? That night, I waited until the world outside my window had turned to shadows, until the noises of the city had quieted down to that lonely hum. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't even sure I wanted to. The darkness inside me was beginning to feel too familiar, too much like a second skin. I kept replaying the past in my mind. My mother's cold smile, her accusations, her manipulations, and my father sitting there silent as always. But something had shifted inside me. The self-doubt, the questions, the guilt, it had all started to turn into something else. Something darker. Something colder. I didn't know when it had started. Maybe it was after the courtroom, when I realized that the battle wasn't just about my daughter anymore. It was about reclaiming the power I had always handed over, the control that I had let slip through my fingers. Maybe I had known it deep down all along, but now I was ready to do something about it. Something I hadn't even dared to think of before. I called my brother the next day. His voice was strained, like he had been rehearsing what he was about to say. "I know what she's been hiding," he started, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, but then it was gone like smoke in the wind. "I don't think I can go through with it," he added. His words were laced with fear. Fear of her. Fear of what might happen if he told me the truth. I could hear him hesitate, and I felt the weight of his silence like an anchor pulling me deeper. "She's always been like this," he said. "You know that." But that wasn't enough. I needed more. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I don't know if I should tell you," he whispered. And right then I knew. He wasn't going to tell me. Not unless I forced it out of him. I couldn't trust him anymore. Couldn't trust anyone. I ended the call and sat there, the quiet of the room closing in around me. I knew the truth now. My brother wasn't just afraid of her. He was complicit. All these years he had been playing both sides, manipulating me as much as she had. It was all part of the game. The lies, the betrayal, the way they had both kept me in the dark, together. They had set me up. They had pushed me to the edge, and when I finally cracked, they were going to be the ones to pick up the pieces and take everything. All of it. The house. The business. The custody of my daughter. But not anymore. Not anymore. It was time to stop playing the victim. It was time to stop being the one who apologized, the one who begged for forgiveness. That woman in the courtroom, the one who had been afraid, the one who had begged for mercy, she was gone. In her place was someone who had nothing left to lose. I could feel the shift inside me like the turning of a key in a lock. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. The anger. The fire. the cold determination that was beginning to burn within me. I was no longer the broken woman I had been. I was the one in control now, and it was time to take what was mine. I met with my lawyer again, this time with a different purpose. The plan was no longer about winning. It was about destroying them, and I didn't care who I had to destroy to do it. I sat across from her, watching her with cold, calculating eyes. She had always been a tool to me, someone who could be manipulated, someone who could help me win in court. But now, she was nothing more than an accessory to my revenge. We need to move quickly, I told her, my voice low and steady. I want everything. I want the house, the business, custody of my daughter, all of it. She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my sudden change in attitude. You sure about this? She asked. And I could see the hesitation in her eyes. But I didn't care. I was sure. More sure than I had ever been about anything in my life. Yes, I said, my voice unwavering. And I want you to make it happen. Now. It wasn't long before I started to see the cracks in the people around me. My mother's once perfect facade was starting to crumble. She was getting desperate, scrambling to cover up the lies she had been telling for years. She was always one step ahead of me, but not anymore. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what I was planning. And that's when it started. The first betrayal. A friend I had trusted, someone I had known for years, turned out to be working with her. She had been feeding her information, helping her keep me in the dark. The realization hit me like a slap in the face, but it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. No, it made me feel alive. It made me realize that I was right. I had been right all along. And I was ready to expose them all. But I wasn't going to do it just yet. No, I was going to wait. I was going to let them think they were safe. Let them think they had one. And when the time was right, I would strike. But not until then. Not until everything was in place. And so I waited. I waited and I watched. I watched the people around me slip further into their lies, further into their deception, until they didn't even realize they were digging their own graves. I could feel the power shift, and it felt so damn good. Because now I was the one who held the cards. And when the time came, I would make sure they all burned. And that's when I stopped being afraid. And if you stayed this long, you already know this wasn't just a story. This was a warning. The quiet had finally settled. It hung in the air like the calm before a storm. And in the center of it all, I was no longer the broken woman who had stumbled through this mess. I was something else now, something sharper, colder. Revenge had become my life's mission. It was the only thing that gave me clarity, purpose, meaning. There was no turning back from this path. My brother, my mother, all of them, they thought they had outsmarted me, played me for a fool, but they hadn't seen what I'd become. A monster? Maybe. But wasn't that what they had turned me into? All their lies, their betrayal, their manipulation, they had been the ones to create this version of me. The version who was willing to destroy everything to get what she wanted. I wasn't afraid of losing anymore. I wasn't afraid of them, of the truth, of the consequences. I had become the very thing I despised. The plan had been in motion for months. Every step, every move was calculated, deliberate. My lawyer had been the first to go. She was nothing more than a pawn, an accessory to my revenge. But I couldn't just end things there. I needed more. I needed them to feel what I had felt, to understand the weight of the betrayal they had thrust upon me. It started with the house, my house. I had seen the papers, I had felt the walls close in on me. I had seen the way they all rallied behind my mother, siding with her, pretending like everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Not anymore. The house had always been the symbol of my family's wealth, their power. It was never really mine. It had always belonged to them. I was just the one they had used, the one they had kept in the dark. But no more. I had gone through the records, found the evidence, uncovered everything they had hidden. I had the power now. And then there was my brother. He was the last person I had trusted, the person I thought I could rely on. But the moment I found the letters, the hidden messages, the deals he had made behind my back, it all became clear. He had always been playing both sides. And in the end, he had been working with my mother the whole time. The secret was out. The betrayal was exposed. I could feel the weight of it in my chest, heavy and suffocating. But it didn't matter anymore. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done being a victim. The confrontation came swiftly like a knife to the heart. I met my brother in the one place I knew he'd be. Our childhood home, the place where everything had started. He had been waiting for me, expecting an apology, maybe even a plea for forgiveness. But there would be none of that. Not from me. As I walked through the door, I saw the look on his face. It was a mixture of guilt and fear, but mostly regret. And that's when I knew. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of losing everything. Losing the power he had worked so hard to keep. But I wasn't there to listen to his excuses, his apologies. There was no room for that. I had seen enough, heard enough. I had known the truth for months, but now it was time to make him see it. The truth that we weren't family anymore. That he had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. The silence between us was deafening as I looked at him, standing there in the living room where we had shared so many memories. You really thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? I asked, my voice cold, steady. He flinched, his eyes darting to the ground. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he muttered, his voice shaking. You have no idea what it's like. But I wasn't interested in his excuses. I was past that. No, I know exactly what it's like, I said, my tone hardening. It's like being betrayed by the one person who was supposed to have your back. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. I'm not here for apologies, Mark, I continued, walking closer to him, feeling the heat of the anger rising in me. I'm here for the truth. The truth you've been hiding from me all these years. The words stung, but they felt right. It was time to tear down everything he had built. Everything he had convinced himself was a lie. And just like that, the facade he had put up crumbled. He confessed. The deals, the lies, the betrayals. All of it. He had been planning it from the start, working with my mother to take everything from me. And in that moment I realized something. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the one who had the power now. I left him standing there, broken and defeated. But the final blow wasn't yet delivered. It came later in the form of a letter. A letter that had been hidden in the attic, buried beneath the dust and the memories of my childhood. It was addressed to me, but it wasn't from anyone I recognized. The handwriting was unfamiliar. But as I read the words, everything became clear. My mother, my family, they knew. They had known everything. They had known I would find the truth eventually. And they had been preparing for this moment all along. The letter contained a confession, a plan. And it wasn't just my brother and mother who had been working together. It was the whole damn family, the entire network of people who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes. They had always known how to control me, how to make me feel like I was losing when, in reality, they had been the ones losing all along. I stood there, the weight of the letter heavy in my hands. It was too much. But it didn't break me. It didn't break me the way I thought it would. Instead, it ignited something inside me. A fire that had been smoldering for so long. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. The world they had built, the lies they had spun, it was all coming down. The final scene unfolded in front of me, in a way I hadn't expected. As I stood there watching the destruction of everything I had once known, I realized something. The revenge, the power, the manipulation, it had all been a part of the journey. But it was never really about them. It was about me. About reclaiming myself. About taking control of my own destiny. And as I walked away from the wreckage, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't victory, but it was something else. Something just as powerful. Something that would stay with me forever. And if you stayed this long, you already know this wasn't just a story. This was a warning. Subscribe. And remember me.